The truth is the backlash you are seeing, the assault that you're seeing, is not because the things you are doing are not working. It's because the things you are doing are working. And those who believe in exclusion see your work as a threat. And now they are attacking you and trying to convince you that the things you are doing aren't working. This is not a moment to pull back. It's a moment to double down. My name is Eric Ward, and I'm a longtime civil rights activist in the United States, primarily focused on the rights of uh, marginalized communities and responding to political violence. I'm the executive vice president of Race Forward, a national civil rights organization focused on the intersection of racial justice and democracy. And I'm a senior fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that focuses on responding to extremist violence and inequality in the South. I came to the work of civil rights and social justice through the roots of two things that happened at the same time. The first was desegregation. I am a child of racial desegregation, the first generation. And desegregation in my period meant going to desegregated schools for the first time. Black and Latino kids being sent to what had been primarily or predominantly all white schools, and white students being sent to public schools that had previously predominantly been either Black, Latino, or a mixture of both. The truth is that desegregation brought both opportunities and real challenges. The backlash was very significant, and that backlash didn't come from other students. I think it's important to note it primarily came from parents and adults. So when I would get off the school bus to head to my desegregated school across town, regularly I and other Latino kids and Black kids like myself were on the receiving end of racial harassment from adults who would drive by in their cars on their way to and from work, screaming out things like "Go back to Africa," making monkey and gorilla noises, or shouting other threats. It happened so much and so quickly. Many of us quickly normalized it. I never told my parents. I never told a adult at the school what seventh grader wanted to stand out, and so we endured this harassment for years. That was occurring. The truth was is that we were never going to bond along lines of racial division in this country. But something happened in that moment that changed the rules of the game, and it was the arrival of punk rock and hip hop. Now, we didn't know the difference between punk and hip hop. We just knew it wasn't Barry Manilow, it wasn't Captain and Tennille, it wasn't Forgive Me Who I Love Now, Lionel Richie. It wasn't the music of our parents. It was music that spoke specifically to our generation and the things that we were experiencing and feeling. The arrival of punk rock allowed some of us to build another identity, not a replacement identity to who we were in the society, but something that competed with us. Becoming a punk rocker and entering the punk scene meant that I became more interested in what a person was listening to, what music they liked, what shows they were going to, what clothes they were wearing, rather than our racial backgrounds. It allowed a space for us to come together. That space came under attack by those who were threatened by the multiracial nature of the punk scene. I often say, not to exaggerate, that the punk scene was the most diverse youth space in America in the late 70s and the 80s. And it threatened adults so much that they labeled the punk scene as gang members. People were harassed physically, and people invaded our spaces. We had a choice as this multiracial identity. Did we come together and defend this one space that we had where we felt that we could all belong together? or did we go back into our segregated spaces? We decided to fight for that space and to hold that space together for anyone who felt alienated, anyone who felt marginalized could feel like they had a home to go to. That was really the beginning of my start around racial justice and civil rights. I was not a kid who was born with this great consciousness around equity, fairness, and opportunity. I was really just a working, poor kid growing up in Los Angeles, trying to make my way day by day. But being grounded in my community really made me ask the question, why were we such a threat? And that's what really started the process. I moved up to the Pacific Northwest in 1986. I and four other of my closest friends, we found ourselves in Eugene, Oregon, one of the whitest cities in America. The Black population was less than 1%. We moved up at a time where the Pacific Northwest was being challenged by organized racists, not people just expressing ignorance, folks who were intentionally trying to turn the Pacific Northwest into an Aryan homeland. Their first target, the multiracial punk scene. And once again, we were left with a choice. Did we respond to this and preserve this scene, or turn around and run home and hide? And we decided to organize, but this time was different. This time we built broad coalitions, coalitions that were so broad you could find Republican conservative farmers from rural areas sitting next to purpled hair punk rockers. We didn't have everything in common. We didn't agree on everything, but we knew that political violence, we knew that bigotry weren't the answers to the complex problems that our society would face. And in short, we drew a broad moral line against bigotry. And it is from that space that I began to understand that it wasn't just about fighting for safety and security of my punk scene. It was also coming to the aid of rural farmers who were being thrown out of work, environmentalists who were being blamed for the shifts in the economy, the lesbian, gay, transgendered community who were also facing threats, immigrants, that at the end of the day, the slogan had to be everyone in, no one out. Often I'm asked, um, Eric, you sound so hopeful or even optimistic. That period in the punk scene sounds so energetic and um, full of possibilities. How could we be in the moment we are now with that type of hope and so many opportunities that occurred in the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s? Here's the frank truth. Even in those moments in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, many of us understood that the moment we find ourselves in right now was inevitable. It wasn't a question of stopping the current debate in the society. And let's be clear about what the current debate in the society is. People think that perhaps it's around voting rights or immigration or economic security. But the truth is that the real debate and fight happening in this country right now is who is an American and what will America look like. It is not a fight about conservatism or liberalism or Republicans versus Democrats. It is a fight about an inclusive democracy versus exclusive authoritarianism. The truth is what we are seeing right now is a backlash against 70 years of civil rights gains in this country. As Frederick Douglass wrote over 100 years ago, power concedes nothing without demand. And the majority of Americans in this country for the last 30 years have bravely and courageously called to live in a multiracial society. And we're seeing the backlash to that. And the backlash is brutal. This is not a moment where I'm grounded in optimism. I've never been optimistic. I am hopeful. I believe at the end of the day, the story that this country gets to tell and other societies get to tell is one about not how they fell into chaos and devoured one another based off of scapegoating and fear. The ultimate story is one about how we came together to face that fear together. But it's not a 30-minute sitcom. It's not one that starts off kind of nice and then there's a problem and then it quickly gets solved and everyone lives happily ever after. We have to stand up for the things that we believe. And we live in a moment right now where people are telling us that the nervousness that we feel, the natural anxiety that comes with change, is something we should be fearful from. But I'll tell you something, the brain doesn't actually know the difference between excitement and anxiety. We actually respond exactly the same, right, to both. It's really what our brain is telling us that we're feeling in this moment. And right now, we are bombarded with propaganda that is telling us that we're afraid or we're filled with anxiety rather than the excitement of possibility. We'll get through this moment, but it'll be a tough moment. It's not a moment about being safe, it's a moment about being brave and leaning into your neighbors and standing up with your best self, your best values, not about, again, the divisions of left or right, but the values of inclusion versus exclusion. We have young people, at least in this country, who are tens of thousands of dollars in debt, who can't find work, who have had their priorities, whether we're talking about climate or access to real health, futures taken from them. I want them to understand one thing: your fears are being used by others in order to derive profit and power. They are not looking to answer your needs. They are just looking to exploit them. And you have to be aware, right, that you have become the commodity in this moment. And those folks do not care about your future. They don't have any real answers except to tell you to be afraid of someone else or to hate someone else. That's not the way forward. The way forward is to come together and we build. And we create off of our dreams, not our nightmares. Think about any horror film. How is the monster successful? The monster comes in, builds mistrust amongst people, makes people divide, go off in their own silos, and the monster slowly devours each individual one at a time. What I tell people, young and old, is to stay together. The second is to ignore the myth of big acts. We talk about the March on Washington, but we don't talk about the 100,000 acts that led to the March on Washington. I have seen how powerful acts can change things when neighbors, when friends come together around shared hopes rather than shared fears. I saw in one neighborhood where division had taken root, right? And a group of folks began chalk messaging stories of inclusion on sidewalks. Simple words: you belong here, all are welcome, this is your community too. It was the small acts, the ones that could have been easily ignored, but they never are. Those small gestures, right? Those gestures open space for neighbors to start conversations. People began to add their own words. The neighborhood began to reclaim its identity as a place where everyone could belong. What started as chalk on the ground grew into block parties, community gardens, and lasting friendships across differences. This is what real welcoming and defiant and embrace of inclusion begins to look like. Those actions extend beyond what we can see. They shape the culture of our neighborhoods, of our fandoms, of our workspaces, of our homes, and every effort to include, connect, and to engage is a quiet defense of the principles that will hold our society together: equal protection under the law and shared responsibilities of building a community together. What I would tell young people is to ignore the propaganda war, the one that tells you to isolate yourself, the one that tells you if you choose not to isolate yourself, that you have already lost the fight. It's simply not true. I have seen this many times in my career. The truth is the backlash you are seeing, the assault that you're seeing, is not because the things you are doing are not working. It's because the things you are doing are working. And those who believe in exclusion see your work as a threat. And now they are attacking you and trying to convince you that the things you are doing aren't working. This is not a moment to pull back. It's a moment to double down. It's not a moment of safety. It's about a moment of bravery. And it is not a moment of hiding. It's a moment to build and to step into community with your friends, with your family, with your neighborhood, with your fandom. If you're Swifties, if you're into hip hop, if you're in mixed martial arts, if you ride bikes, if you quilt, whatever it is you do, lean into that community, but lean into it with inclusion. Build it as broad as you can. Don't worry about the politics of left or right. Worry about the values that hold you together: values of opportunity, values of humor, values of equity, values that move you all forward together. I think we all desire um, safety. I have most of my life. I think all I've ever wanted was to feel safe. And that's a tall order for a Black working poor male in the United States of America. So I don't know if I've ever really known what it is like to feel completely safe. And for those who do, I don't want you to feel shame. And I think it's phenomenal, and hold on to that. You have that right to feel safe. I'm also an honest person, though, and I just have to tell people this is not a moment of safety. One can hide, and perhaps you will have temporary safety, but I don't think you'll be able to hide from your spirit and your soul that so wants you to show up in this moment. What I've done myself is, in this moment, particularly over the last weeks, I've stopped focusing on safety and started focusing on bravery. And what does it mean to be brave in this moment? Not what does it mean to be safe in this moment. But bravery doesn't mean that we act on impulse. It means that we are thoughtful. It means we don't put people at unnecessary risk, including ourselves. It means that we model what good leadership looks like. And leadership does not demand that people make sacrifices or put themselves in harm's way without real strategic, conscious principles in play. And the most conscious and strategic principle that I can think of right now is joy. Authoritarianism in the United States won't arrive with tanks. It has arrived with a promise to end chaos by shrinking who counts. And the claim is simple: pluralism feels noisy and unsafe. That's their argument. Therefore, only a firm hand can keep us safe. Those of us committed to opposing authoritarianism, what I mean by opposing authoritarianism is those of us committed to recognizing the humanity of one another, must start by asserting a different test around safety. Safety is actually a contest around consent against control. We win safety by making belonging work in public, where people can see and feel it. And I think over the next 10 to 20 years, the central domestic issue will be whether the United States can run as a multiracial democracy, where that belonging is routine and intimidation is costly. The sides are crystal clear: universal rights versus ethno national sorting, fact based delivery versus grievance politics, and coalitional discipline versus intercommunal fraction. And I think for us, authoritarians expect a culture war. They don't expect us to undercut their pitch with joy. Joy at the end of the day will overcome fear, will overcome anxiety. We have to find our joy. Do not allow them to steal your joy in this moment. And your joy has to show up visibly so that other people can see it and begin to own their own joy. The bravest and safest thing that we can do in this moment is to practice that joy in small and little ways. We have to begin to build our muscles. That is ultimately what will keep all of us safe. At the end of the day, this is about inclusion. It is about growing one's community, growing one's neighborhood, growing one's social club, growing one's religious institution, wherever you are. It is about growing and making more inclusive. If you want to know whether you're going to be on the right side of history at any given point, just ask yourself the question: am I growing a space or am I shrinking it? And if you are shrinking it, you have let go of joy and you have absorbed all the cultural norms of authoritarians in this moment. The truth is that authoritarians aren't bringing division and fear and anxiety into our communities, into our nation. They are merely organizing the fear, anxiety, and division that already exists. We can take away that power by inserting joy back into our work and back into our souls. That's what's going to move us forward and keep us safe in this period. As artists who are now facing open repression, right? We are seeing stories every week of artists and those in culture who are being fired, who are facing different forms of repression, threats, and removal of funding and support that is so important to the freedom of expression in America and elsewhere. The US isn't exceptional in this. We have seen this in other countries as well: Hungary, Russia, India, a host of places. And it can feel daunting as an artist. Most artists struggle to make their art anyway. And now it's as if 100 tons have been placed on them. And again, the goal is to make artists give up their art, to make it so punitive and painful that artists will turn away. Certainly, we can give up, but we are giving up on generations of artists who struggled to bring us to this very point in history to face these challenges. We are not the first artists to face persecution and repression. What is happening in the United States actually bonds artists globally. Around the world, other artists have and continue to face the same conditions. Should not see this as a defeat, but an opportunity to build a real global and international mindset with artists around the world, to learn from them. This is an opportunity to learn how other artists have continued to make their art in spite of the conditions that they may be facing in their own countries, in spite of the fact that the funding isn't there, in spite of the fact that we no longer get to perform to 500,000 people and we only get to perform to 100, that it is still important that we show up. And why is it important as artists for us to show up in this way? Because politics cannot provide the answers to the complex solutions that we are facing right now. This is also a cultural moment, a moment of sharing values. And what shares better values than art? What better empowers people to get up and to struggle the next day, to move forward one more day than art pieces and music and poetry, film, documentary, even fashion, the things that inspire people to connect to one another right is so critically important. And we don't get that without artists. I'm not here to tell artists in this moment that they are not going to face repression. The truth is we are not unique here in the United States. And we can look at what has happened in other countries and expect that to happen here. But the thing I will say is those artists who do stand up, those artists who do lean, you will be remembered. So will your art. Generations will remember this generation for the way that it chose to show up. And that's what we have to do right now. When I was a little kid, I used to ponder this question every summer. What would I have done in the midst of the 1960 civil rights movement? How might I have shown up? Now we remember how artists showed up in that period. We have watched how artists have shown up in other places around the world. I know many artists ponder that question now. How might they have shown up in the midst of the 1960s? The truth is we no longer have to ponder that question. History will judge us. We should move forward, hearts open. The role of art is to inspire people to live, inspire people to dream, and inspire people to be brave. And artists have to model that for the rest of us right now. There is no other group in our society who are better positioned to lead the moral light that is needed in America.